I never expected to find myself standing on this particular piece of earth again, watching my daughter Emma chase butterflies through the same wildflower meadow where I once played as a child. The morning mist clung to the mountain peaks surrounding our family's private resort, Pine Ridge Lodge, and for a moment, I felt that familiar tug of nostalgia mixed with something darker, something I'd spent years trying to forget. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm the kind of person who builds bridges instead of burning them. At least, that's what I told myself for 43 years. I've always been the peacekeeper in the family, the one who smooths over conflicts and finds middle ground where none should exist. But standing here now, watching my 12-year-old daughter discover the same hidden creek where I learned to skip stones, I realize that some bridges are built on foundations of sand, and eventually, even the strongest structures must fall. The resort sprawls across 200 acres of pristine Colorado wilderness, a testament to my grandfather's vision and my father's relentless work ethic. Pine Ridge Lodge has been in the Mitchell family for 3 generations, carved from nothing but determination and an understanding that sometimes the most beautiful things in life require the most sacrifice. The main lodge is a masterpiece of timber and stone, with soaring ceilings that frame the Rocky Mountains like a living photograph. 24 guest cabins dot the landscape, each one positioned to capture a different perspective of the valley below. I know every inch of this place, every trail, every secret spot where the aspen trees whisper ancient stories to those willing to listen. I know because I helped build it, not just with my hands, but with my heart, with countless summers spent learning the business from my father, while my cousins played video games in their air-conditioned homes. I know because I chose to stay when everyone else left for college in distant cities, pursuing dreams that didn't include pine sap under their fingernails, or the satisfaction of seeing a guest's face light up when they catch their first trout. Emma doesn't know any of this history yet. To her, Pine Ridge Lodge is simply the magical place where we spend our summers, where she can run free and explore without the constraints of city life. She doesn't understand that this place exists because of choices made long before she was born, sacrifices that shaped not just the landscape, but the very foundation of our family's legacy. "Mom, look," Emma calls out, her voice carrying across the meadow with the kind of pure joy that makes my chest tighten. She's standing by the old oak tree where I once carved my initials, her hands cupped around something precious. "I found a baby bird's nest." I walk over to her, my hiking boots crunching on the familiar path, worn smooth by 3 generations of Mitchell feet. The morning air is crisp with that particular mountain freshness that you can't find anywhere else, tinged with the scent of pine and the promise of adventure. Emma's dark hair catches the sunlight, and for a moment, I see myself at her age, full of wonder and unaware of the complexities that would later define my relationship with this place. "Be careful, sweetheart," I say, crouching down beside her. We don't want to disturb the mama bird. The nest is perfectly woven, a small miracle of engineering tucked into the crook of a low branch. 3 tiny eggs rest inside, blue as the Colorado sky above us. Emma's eyes are wide with fascination, and I remember that same sense of discovery, the feeling that Pine Ridge Lodge was full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. "Will they hatch while we're here?" she asks, her voice hushed with reverence. "Maybe," I tell her, though I know our stay will be shorter than the incubation period. "But even if they don't, we can check on them every day we're here. Sometimes the most important things happen when we're not watching. It's a lesson I learned the hard way, one that would soon prove more relevant than I could have imagined. The most important things often happen in the spaces between words, in the silences we choose to fill or ignore, in the moments when we think no one is listening." We head back toward the lodge as the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across the meadow. The main building comes into view, its massive stone fireplace already sending smoke curling into the clear morning air. My cousin Bradley must have started the fire early. A small kindness that reminds me why family gatherings here feel so special, so removed from the noise and complications of our everyday lives. Or at least, that's what I tell myself as we climb the wooden steps to the wraparound porch. The truth is more complicated, layered with decades of unspoken resentments and carefully maintained facades. The Mitchell family has always been good at presenting a united front, even when the foundation underneath is cracking. "Sarah!" My Aunt Margaret waves from the kitchen window, flour dusting her apron. Perfect timing. I'm just starting the pancakes. Margaret is my father's sister, a woman who has spent her life perfecting the art of hospitality. She's the one who ensures every guest feels welcomed, every meal is memorable, every detail is attended to with the kind of care that makes Pine Ridge Lodge feel like home, even to strangers. She's also the one who has never quite forgiven me for inheriting the business instead of her son Bradley, though she'd never say such a thing directly. The kitchen is the heart of the lodge, a sprawling space with commercial-grade appliances and enough counter space to feed 50 people without breaking a sweat. The morning sunlight streams through tall windows, illuminating the familiar chaos of a family breakfast in progress. My cousin Bradley stands by the coffee maker, his usual easy smile in place as he jokes with his teenage son Tyler about something I can't quite catch. "Morning, cuz," Bradley says, raising his coffee mug in greeting. "Emma, you're just in time to help with the most important job of the day." "What's that?" Emma asks, immediately drawn into his orbit the way children always are, with adults who remember what it's like to be young. "Taste testing the pancakes, of course," Bradley replies with mock seriousness. "It's a family tradition. Your mom used to be the official taster when we were kids." He's right, of course. I remember standing on a wooden stool in this very kitchen, solemnly sampling each batch of pancakes, while my Aunt Margaret made adjustments to the recipe. It was a responsibility I took seriously, one of the many small ways I felt connected to the daily rhythms of the lodge. Emma beams at the honor, and I feel a familiar warmth watching her integrate so naturally into this place that has shaped so much of who I am. She doesn't know that I've been fighting to maintain her connection to Pine Ridge Lodge, that there are forces within our own family who would prefer she remain on the periphery, a guest rather than a true inheritor of the Mitchell legacy. "Where's everyone else?" I ask, accepting a cup of coffee from Bradley. "Dad's down at the dock with Uncle Robert," Tyler says, not looking up from his phone. "They're arguing about the best fishing spots again." "Some things never change," Margaret laughs, but there's an edge to her voice that I recognize. "Your father and mine could argue about which way the wind blows." She's referring to my father, James Mitchell, the current owner of Pine Ridge Lodge, and the man who built this place into the successful business it is today. He and Margaret's husband Robert have been having the same arguments for 30 years, a dance of brotherly rivalry that usually ends with laughter and shared drinks on the porch. But this summer feels different. There's an undercurrent of tension I can't quite identify, a sense that conversations are happening without me, decisions being made in rooms I'm not invited to enter. I've noticed the way certain topics are dropped when I walk into a room, the way eyes avoid mine when I ask direct questions about the future of the lodge. "I should go say hello," I tell them, though part of me dreads the conversation I know is coming. My father has been dropping hints about retirement, about the need to secure the family's future, in ways that make my stomach clench with anxiety. Emma stays behind to help with breakfast, and I make my way down the familiar path to the lake. The dock extends 50 feet into the crystal-clear water, a structure my grandfather built with his own hands, and that my father has maintained with religious devotion. The morning light turns the water into a mirror, reflecting the surrounding peaks in perfect detail. I find them exactly where Tyler said they'd be. 2 men in their 70s standing at the end of the dock with fishing rods in hand. their conversation carrying clearly across the water. "I'm telling you, James, it's the only way to protect what we've built," Robert is saying, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "The taxes alone are going to kill us if we don't restructure soon." I know," my father replies, but there's resignation in his tone that makes my chest tighten. It's just hard to think about changing something that's worked for so long. They see me approaching, and their conversation stops abruptly, replaced by the kind of forced cheerfulness that immediately puts me on edge. My father, James Mitchell, is a man who has never learned to hide his emotions effectively. His weathered face, carved by decades of mountain sun and honest work, tells stories that his words often won't. "Sarah!" he calls out, his voice carrying across the water with an enthusiasm that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Come see what we caught." I walk out onto the dock, my footsteps echoing against the wooden planks. The familiar smell of lake water and pine sap fills my nostrils, grounding me in this place that has been my sanctuary for as long as I can remember. But today, even the familiar comfort feels fragile, like something precious that might slip away if I'm not careful. "Nice trout," I say, admiring the fish in Robert's cooler. "Emma will be excited to hear about it." "That granddaughter of yours is quite the little explorer," Robert says, his smile more genuine now. "Found her yesterday trying to count all the wildflowers in the meadow." "She gets that from you," my father says, and for a moment, the tension from their earlier conversation seems to fade. "Remember when you tried to catalog every bird species on the property?" I do remember. I was 16, armed with a field guide and a notebook, determined to create a comprehensive record of Pine Ridge Lodge's wildlife. It was the summer I fell in love with this place in a way that went beyond childhood attachment. The summer I realized that my future was inexorably linked to these mountains, these trails, this family legacy that felt both like a gift and a burden. "Dad," I say carefully, "I heard you and Robert talking about restructuring. Is there something we need to discuss?" The silence that follows is heavy with implications. My father and Robert exchange a look that speaks volumes. A wordless conversation that excludes me completely. It's a feeling I've experienced more and more often lately. The sense that important decisions are being made without my input, despite the fact that I've been running the day-to-day operations of the lodge for the past 15 years. "It's complicated, Sarah," my father finally says, his voice gentle but firm. "There are family considerations we need to address." "What kind of family considerations?" I press, though part of me already knows I won't like the answer. Robert clears his throat, a sound that immediately puts me on alert. The kind that involve making sure Pine Ridge Lodge stays in the family for generations to come. There's something in his tone that makes my skin crawl, a condescension that reduces me to a child who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of adult decision-making. It's the same tone I've been hearing my entire life, the voice that explains why I should be grateful for my position, rather than expecting to earn it, why I should accept limitations that were never placed on the men in my family. "I am family," I say quietly, but with steel in my voice. "I've been running this place for 15 years. I think I deserve to know what's being discussed." My father sighs, a sound that seems to carry the weight of decades. "Of course you are, sweetheart. But there are legal and financial considerations that go beyond daily operations." "Such as?" Another loaded silence. The morning breeze picks up, causing ripples across the lake's surface and making the dock sway slightly beneath our feet. In the distance, I can hear Emma's laughter echoing from the lodge, a sound that reminds me exactly what I'm fighting for. "The tax implications of passing the property to the next generation are significant," Robert explains, his tone taking on the careful neutrality of someone delivering news they know will be unwelcome. "We're exploring options that would ensure the lodge remains profitable and sustainable. Options that include Emma," I ask, though I already know the answer from the way they both avoid my eyes. Emma is very young, my father says carefully. These decisions need to be made with long-term stability in mind. Long-term stability. The phrase hits me like a physical blow, carrying with it the implication that I am somehow inadequate, that my years of dedication and sacrifice have been nothing more than a temporary arrangement until the real heirs could take their rightful place. It's a narrative I've been fighting my entire life. The persistent suggestion that my love for this place is somehow less valid than my cousin's casual interest, that my commitment is less valuable than their potential. I want to argue, to defend my position and Emma's future, but something in their faces tells me that this conversation is already over, that decisions have been made in rooms I wasn't invited to enter. Instead, I simply nod, swallowing the words that want to pour out of me like water through a broken dam. I should get back, I say, my voice carefully neutral. Emma will be wondering where I am. Sarah, my father calls as I turn to leave, and something in his tone makes me pause. You know how much this place means to me, how much you mean to me. I know, Dad, I reply, though the words feel hollow in my mouth. I know. I walk back toward the lodge, my footsteps heavy on the wooden planks. The morning that had started with such promise now feels tainted, overshadowed by the realization that the ground beneath my feet is far less stable than I'd believed. The laughter from the kitchen grows louder as I approach, and I force myself to smile, to present the facade of normalcy that has become second nature over the years. But inside, something fundamental has shifted. The seed of understanding that has been growing in my chest for months has finally taken root, and I can feel it spreading through my consciousness like wildfire. The conversations that stop when I enter a room, the decisions made without my input, the careful way certain topics are avoided. It all suddenly makes perfect sense. I am not the heir to Pine Ridge Lodge. I am the caretaker, the one who maintains the property until the real inheritors are ready to claim their birthright. And Emma, my beautiful, brilliant daughter, who loves this place with the same fierce devotion that has defined my entire life, is destined to be nothing more than a guest in her own family's legacy. The realization should devastate me, but instead, it fills me with a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in my life, I understand exactly where I stand, exactly what I'm fighting for, and exactly what I'm willing to do to protect it. I climb the steps to the lodge, my mind already racing with possibilities. The sound of Emma's laughter draws me forward, and I realize that some battles are worth fighting, even when the odds seem impossible, especially when the odds seem impossible. The kitchen is exactly as I left it, filled with the warm chaos of family life. Emma sits at the large wooden table, her face serious with concentration, as she helps Margaret measure ingredients for the next batch of pancakes. Bradley and Tyler have moved to the living room, their voices carrying through the open doorway as they discuss plans for the day. "Mom!" Emma calls out when she sees me. "Aunt Margaret is teaching me the secret pancake recipe." "It's not really secret," Margaret laughs, but there's genuine affection in her voice. "It's just a matter of getting the proportions right." I watch Emma carefully measure flour into the large mixing bowl, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. She looks so much like I did at her age. The same determined expression, the same careful attention to detail. She belongs here, in this kitchen, in this family, in this legacy that stretches back 3 generations. "Where's Bradley?" I ask, noticing his absence from the kitchen. "He went to town with Tyler," Margaret replies, her voice carefully neutral. "They had some errands to run." I nod, though something in her tone suggests there's more to the story. Bradley has been making a lot of trips to town lately, often accompanied by hushed phone conversations that end abruptly when I walk into the room. As the lodge's general manager, I should know about any business being conducted on behalf of the property. But increasingly, I feel like I'm being kept in the dark about important decisions. Can I help with anything? I ask, needing to keep my hands busy while my mind processes the morning's revelations. Actually, Margaret says, her voice taking on a careful tone, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. About the family reunion next month. The annual Mitchell family reunion is a tradition that goes back to my grandfather's time, a week-long gathering that brings together relatives from across the country. It's always been one of my favorite times of year, a chance to reconnect with extended family and share the beauty of Pine Ridge Lodge with people who understand its significance. What about it? I ask, though something in Margaret's expression makes me wary. Well, we've been thinking about making some changes to the format this year. Maybe focusing more on the business side of things, bringing in some outside advisors to help us plan for the future. Outside advisors? The phrase sends a chill down my spine, carrying with it implications that I don't want to examine too closely. What kind of outside advisors? Legal and financial professionals, Margaret says, her voice taking on that same careful neutrality I heard from Robert at the dock. People who specialize in family business transitions. Family business transitions. Each word feels like a carefully placed stone in a wall that's being built around me, a structure designed to contain my influence, while maintaining the illusion of inclusion. I've been in business long enough to understand what such meetings typically accomplish, how they're used to formalize changes that have already been decided behind closed doors. Mom, look, Emma interrupts, holding up a perfectly round pancake. I made this one all by myself. That's beautiful, sweetheart, I say, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. You're a natural. But even as I praise my daughter's accomplishment, my mind is racing through the implications of Margaret's words. The family reunion has always been a celebration, a time to strengthen bonds and share stories. But this year, it seems, it will be something else entirely, a carefully orchestrated transition of power that will formalize my role as an outsider in my own family's business. The morning continues with its familiar rhythms, but everything feels different now, tainted by the knowledge that I'm being systematically excluded from decisions that will affect not just my future, but Emma's as well. I help with breakfast, organize activities for the day, and maintain the cheerful facade that has become my specialty over the years. But underneath the surface, something is changing. The seed of understanding that was planted during my conversation with my father and Robert is growing, spreading through my consciousness like fire through dry timber. I'm beginning to see patterns I've ignored for years, to recognize the careful choreography of exclusion that has been performed around me for most of my adult life. As the morning turns to afternoon, I find myself watching Emma with new eyes, seeing not just my beloved daughter, but the next generation of Mitchell women who will be told they're valued while being systematically marginalized. The realization fills me with a fierce protectiveness that surprises me with its intensity. I won't let that happen. I won't let Emma grow up believing that her love for this place is less important than her cousin's casual interest, that her dreams are less valid than their expectations. I won't let her stand on the sidelines of her own family's legacy, watching from a distance as others make decisions about her future. The afternoon passes in a blur of activity, but my mind remains focused on the growing certainty that change is coming, whether I embrace it or not. The question is no longer whether I'll fight for Emma's place in the family business, but how far I'm willing to go to ensure that she never has to stand in the shadows the way I have. As the sun begins to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I make a decision that will change everything. I will not accept the role of caretaker any longer. I will not stand by and watch as my daughter is relegated to the margins of her own heritage. The battle for Pine Ridge Lodge is about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I'm ready to fight for what's mine. Chapter 2. The Revelation. The next morning brings with it the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after a sleepless night of reckoning. I've been awake since 3 a.m., sitting by my bedroom window and watching the stars fade into dawn, my mind churning through decades of memories with the ruthless precision of someone who has finally decided to see the truth. Emma is still sleeping in the twin bed beside mine, her breathing soft and regular, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shifts happening in her family's foundation. The guest room we share is on the 3rd floor of the lodge, with windows that frame the mountains like a living postcard. It's the same room I stayed in as a child, the same room where I once dreamed of running this place someday, of carrying on the Mitchell legacy with the same devotion my grandfather and father had shown. Now, looking out at the familiar landscape, I realize how naive those dreams were. The Mitchell legacy was never meant to include me. Not really. I was allowed to tend it, to nurture it, to pour my heart and soul into its success, but always with the understanding that I was temporary, a placeholder until the real inheritors were ready to claim their prize. The shower down the hall runs for exactly 7 minutes, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps on the wooden floors. Bradley, starting his day with the same military precision he's maintained since his brief stint in the Army 20 years ago. He'll be dressed and in the kitchen within 10 minutes, coffee brewing and breakfast planned before the rest of the family even begins to stir. I dress quietly, careful not to wake Emma, and make my way downstairs. The lodge is different in the early morning hours, filled with the kind of peaceful silence that only comes before the day's activities begin. The massive stone fireplace holds the remnants of last night's fire, and the scent of pine and wood smoke permeates the air. Bradley is exactly where I expected him to be, standing at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee in hand, his attention focused on a stack of papers spread across the surface. He looks up when I enter, his expression shifting from concentration to something that might be guilt if I didn't know him better. "Morning, Sarah," he says, his voice carrying its usual easy warmth. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I reply, pouring myself coffee from the pot he's already prepared. "What are you working on?" The question hangs in the air between us, and I watch as Bradley's face goes through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally, resignation. His hands move almost imperceptibly to cover the papers, but not before I catch a glimpse of official-looking letterhead and what appears to be a legal document. "Just some lodge business," he says, his tone carefully neutral. "Nothing urgent. It's a lie, of course," delivered with the same practiced ease he's used to deflect my questions for months. But this time, I don't let it slide. This time, I step closer, my eyes fixed on the papers he's trying to hide. "Bradley," I say quietly, "what kind of lodge business requires legal documents that I haven't seen?" The silence that follows is heavy with implications. Bradley's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, and I can see him weighing his options, calculating how much he can reveal without exposing the larger plan. It's a look I've seen before, usually right before someone delivers news they know will be unwelcome. "It's complicated, Sarah," he finally says, echoing my father's words from the dock. "There are family considerations that need to be addressed." "Show me," I say, extending my hand toward the papers. "Sarah, I don't think—" "Show me," I repeat, and there's something in my voice that makes him step back slightly. "I'm not asking, Bradley. I'm telling you." For a moment, we stand there in the early morning light, cousins who grew up together, who shared countless summers exploring these mountains, who once talked about running the lodge together someday. But that easy familiarity is gone now, replaced by something harder, more calculating. Finally, Bradley sighs and steps aside, revealing the documents spread across the counter. My eyes scan the pages quickly, my legal training from years of handling the lodge's contracts kicking in automatically. Property transfer documents, tax restructuring plans, corporate reorganization proposals. And there, in black and white, the truth I've been afraid to acknowledge. Pine Ridge Lodge is being transferred to a family trust, with Bradley as the primary beneficiary and trustee. The documents are dated 3 months ago, signed by my father, and witnessed by Robert and Margaret. My name appears exactly once, in a subordinate clause that grants me management privileges at the discretion of the trustee. The papers blur slightly as I read them, my hands trembling with a rage so pure it feels like lightning in my veins. 15 years of my life, 15 years of building this business, of sacrificing my own dreams for the family legacy, and I'm being reduced to an employee who serves at the pleasure of someone else's generosity. Sarah, Bradley says, his voice carrying a tone I've never heard before, something between apology and warning. It's not what you think, isn't it? I ask, my voice deadly calm, because it looks like my father has signed away my inheritance to you, and you've all been planning this behind my back for months. It's about protecting the business, Bradley insists, but there's no conviction in his voice. The tax implications alone. Don't, I interrupt, my composure finally cracking. Don't you dare try to justify this as some kind of business necessity. This is about power, about control, about making sure the Mitchell name stays with the Mitchell men. Bradley's face flushes, and for a moment I see a flash of something that might be shame. You're overreacting, Sarah. Your role won't change. You'll still run the day-to-day operations, still make the decisions that matter. At your discretion, I point out, my voice rising despite my efforts to maintain control. I'll be your employee, Bradley. Your employee in the business my family built. Our family built, he corrects. And there's an edge to his voice now, a hint of the entitlement that has been lurking beneath his surface charm for years. This place belongs to all of us, not just you. Then why wasn't I consulted about this decision? I demand, gesturing toward the papers. Why wasn't I included in the planning meetings? Why am I finding out about this by accident? Bradley doesn't answer immediately, and in that silence, I hear the truth more clearly than any words could express. I wasn't consulted because my opinion didn't matter. I wasn't included because my consent wasn't required. I'm finding out by accident, because they never intended for me to find out at all. Not until the transfer was complete and irreversible. Where's Emma in all this? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. What happens to her inheritance? Bradley's expression shifts, and I can see him choosing his words carefully. Emma will always have a place here, Sarah. She's family. A place, I repeat, the phrase tasting bitter in my mouth. Like the place I've had for the past 15 years? Sarah, get out, I say quietly, but with such finality that Bradley actually steps backward. Get out of this kitchen, get out of this lodge, and get away from me before I do something we'll both regret. You can't just... This is still my home, I interrupt, my voice carrying a steel that surprises even me. Until those papers are final, this is still my home, and I'm telling you to leave. Bradley stares at me for a long moment, and I can see him weighing his options. Finally, he gathers up the papers and heads toward the door, but he pauses at the threshold. This doesn't have to be a fight, Sarah, he says, his voice carrying a note of warning. We can all work together to make this transition smooth. You're right, I reply, my voice deadly calm. It doesn't have to be a fight, but it's going to be one anyway. After Bradley leaves, I stand alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of home, and feel more isolated than I have in my entire life. The morning light streams through the windows, illuminating the space where 4 generations of Mitchell women have prepared meals, shared stories, and built the foundation of family tradition. But I'm not really a Mitchell, am I? Not in the way that counts. I'm a Mitchell by marriage, by circumstance, by the accident of being born female in a family that has always valued its sons more than its daughters. I'm a caretaker, a temporary guardian of a legacy that was never meant to be mine. The sound of footsteps on the stairs pulls me from my thoughts, and I look up to see Emma descending, her hair tousled with sleep and her favorite stuffed animal tucked under her arm. She looks so young, so innocent, so completely unaware of the battle that's about to engulf her family. "Morning, Mom," she says, climbing onto one of the kitchen stools. "Can we check on the bird nest today?" "Of course, sweetheart," I say, forcing a smile. "But first, let's get you some breakfast." I move through the familiar routine of preparing Emma's meal, my hands steady despite the turmoil in my mind. She chatters about her plans for the day, about the flowers she wants to pick and the trails she wants to explore, and I listen with the part of my attention that isn't consumed by the growing certainty that everything is about to change. "Mom," Emma says, her voice carrying a note of concern. "Are you okay? You look sad." I pause in my preparations, struck by her perceptiveness. Emma has always been intuitive, able to sense the emotional undercurrents that adults try to hide. It's a gift that will serve her well in life. But right now, it makes my heart ache. "I'm fine, baby," I tell her, though the words feel hollow. "Just thinking about grown-up things." "Are they bad grown-up things?" she asks, her dark eyes serious. I consider lying, giving her the kind of reassuring platitudes that adults use to shield children from harsh realities. But something in her expression stops me. Emma deserves better than comfortable lies. She deserves to understand the world she's inheriting, even if that world is more complicated than I'd hoped. Some of them are challenging, I admit, but that's what makes them grown-up things. They require grown-up solutions. Emma nods solemnly, as if this explanation makes perfect sense. "Are you going to solve them?" "I'm going to try," I tell her, and for the first time since reading those papers, I feel a spark of determination. I'm going to try very hard. The rest of the morning passes in a blur of activity, but my mind remains focused on the documents I read in Bradley's hands. Property transfer, tax restructuring, corporate reorganization, all the legal mechanisms that will transform me from owner to employee, from inheritor to outsider. But there's something else. Something that Bradley's carefully worded explanations couldn't quite hide. The transfer isn't complete yet. The papers I saw were proposals, draft documents that still require final signatures and legal filing. There's still time to fight, still time to change the outcome. The realization fills me with a fierce energy that I haven't felt in years. I've spent so long trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect employee, the perfect caretaker, that I'd forgotten what it feels like to fight for something that matters. But watching Emma explore the grounds with such joy, seeing her natural connection to this place, I remember why the battle is worth fighting. This isn't just about my inheritance anymore. It's about Emma's future, about the kind of world I want to leave for her. It's about refusing to accept the limitations that have been placed on me, about demanding the respect and recognition that I've earned through years of dedication and sacrifice. The afternoon brings with it the arrival of more family members, cousins and aunts and uncles who have come to spend the weekend at Pine Ridge Lodge. They greet me with the same warmth they've always shown, but now I can see the subtle undercurrents that I've been blind to for so long. The way conversations shift when I approach, the careful neutrality in their voices when they discuss the future of the lodge, the way they include me in planning while excluding me from decision-making. I watch it all with new eyes, cataloging each slight, each exclusion, each moment of casual dismissal. The pattern is so clear now that I wonder how I missed it for so long. I've been living in a carefully constructed bubble, allowed to believe I was essential while being systematically marginalized. But the bubble has burst, and I can see the truth with brutal clarity. The Mitchell family has never seen me as an equal, never viewed my contributions as anything more than temporary assistance until the real inheritors were ready to take control. I've been playing a game where the rules were rigged against me from the beginning, where my only role was to lose gracefully. Well, I'm done losing gracefully. I'm done accepting limitations that were never mine to accept. I'm done being the perfect caretaker for a legacy that was never meant to be mine. That evening, as the family gathers for dinner, I find myself studying their faces with the detached interest of an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. These people who have been my family for 15 years, who have shared holidays and celebrations and moments of joy, suddenly seem like strangers wearing familiar masks. The conversation flows around me, touching on safe topics like the weather, the lodge's guest reviews, and plans for the weekend. But underneath the surface pleasantries, I can feel the tension, the awareness that something has shifted in the family dynamic. They know, even if they're not sure exactly what I've discovered. "Sarah," Margaret says during a lull in the conversation, "I was wondering if you'd had a chance to think about our discussion regarding the family reunion." All eyes turn to me, and I can feel the weight of their collective attention. This is a test, I realize. A chance for me to show that I'm still willing to play by the old rules, to accept my diminished role without causing a scene. "I've thought about it," I say carefully, my voice carrying a calm that surprises even me. "And I think it's a wonderful idea to bring in outside advisors. In fact, I've already contacted a few legal professionals of my own." The silence that follows is deafening. Margaret's fork pauses halfway to her mouth, and I can see Robert and my father exchange a look that speaks volumes. Bradley, who has been unusually quiet throughout dinner, finally meets my eyes, and I can see the recognition there. He knows that I know, and more importantly, he knows that I'm not going to accept the status quo. That's great, Sarah," Margaret says, her voice tight with forced enthusiasm. "What kind of legal professionals?" "Estate planning attorneys," I reply, taking a sip of my wine. "Business succession specialists, people who understand the complexities of family enterprises and the importance of protecting all stakeholders." The word stakeholders hangs in the air like a challenge. Everyone at the table understands its implications. The suggestion that I consider myself more than just an employee or manager. I'm claiming my place as a legitimate participant in decisions about the lodge's future. "Of course," my father says, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone trying to diffuse a potential conflict. "It's always good to get multiple perspectives." "Exactly," I agree, my smile never wavering. "I want to make sure that Emma's interests are properly protected in any restructuring plans." The mention of Emma shifts the dynamic at the table. Whatever they might be willing to do to me, they're not prepared to openly exclude a 12-year-old girl from her family's legacy. Not yet, anyway. "Emma will always be taken care of," Robert says, his voice carrying a note of finality. "She's family." "Yes," I say, my voice soft but steel-edged. "She is family, and family takes care of each other." The conversation moves on to other topics, but the damage is done. The careful facade of family unity has cracked, revealing the fault lines that have been there all along. I've drawn my battle lines, made it clear that I won't be moved aside quietly. After dinner, I help clear the table while the others migrate to the living room. The familiar routine of cleaning up feels different now, less like a family obligation and more like a performance. I'm playing the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law, the helpful relative who doesn't cause trouble. But as I wash dishes and put away leftovers, my mind is working on other things. The legal research I'll need to do, the documents I'll need to review, the strategies I'll need to develop. The battle for Pine Ridge Lodge has begun, and I intend to fight it with everything I have. Emma appears at my elbow, her small hands reaching for a dish towel. "I can help, Mom." "Thank you, sweetheart," I say, handing her a plate to dry. "You're always such a good helper." She beams at the praise, completely unaware of the larger forces swirling around her. In her world, Pine Ridge Lodge is simply home, a place where she belongs without question. I'm determined to keep it that way. "Mom," Emma says, her voice carrying that particular tone children use when they're working up to an important question. "Are we going to keep coming here? To the lodge?" The question hits me like a physical blow. Emma has sensed something, some change in the family dynamic that has made her question what she's always taken for granted. The security of this place, the assumption that it will always be part of her life. "What makes you ask that, baby?" I say, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "I don't know," she says, her small face scrunched in concentration. Everyone seems different, like they're worried about something. Out of the mouths of babes, Emma has picked up on the tension that the adults are trying so hard to hide, the undercurrents of conflict that are reshaping the family dynamic. She doesn't understand the politics or the legal implications, but she can feel the change in the air. Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions, I tell her, choosing my words carefully. But I want you to know that this place will always be special to us, no matter what happens. It's not exactly a lie, but it's not the whole truth either. The lodge will always be special to us, but whether we'll have the right to continue calling it home is another question entirely. A question that I'm determined to answer in our favor. "Promise?" Emma asks, her dark eyes serious. "I promise," I say, and I mean it. I promise that I'll do everything in my power to protect what's ours. Emma nods, satisfied with my answer, and returns to her careful drying of the dishes. But her question has crystallized something in my mind, a fierce determination that goes beyond personal pride or wounded feelings. This is about Emma's future, about the kind of world I want to leave for her. The evening passes with its usual rhythms, but I find myself watching the family dynamics with new eyes. The way Bradley positions himself as the natural leader, the way Margaret defers to him on matters of lodge policy, the way my father seems to be gradually withdrawing from active management. It's all part of a carefully orchestrated transition, designed to make Bradley's ascension seem natural and inevitable. But I'm not going to make it easy for them. I'm not going to step aside gracefully and accept a diminished role in the business I've helped build. I'm going to fight for every inch of ground, every legal right, every moral claim I have to this place. As the family begins to disperse for the evening, I find myself alone with my father, for the first time since our conversation at the dock. He's settling into his favorite armchair by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in hand, looking every one of his 73 years. "Dad," I say, taking the chair across from him. "We need to talk." He looks up at me, and I can see the resignation in his eyes. He knows this conversation was inevitable, has probably been dreading it for months. "Sarah, I know you're upset." "I'm not upset," I interrupt, my voice calm but firm. "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." He flinches at the word disappointed, and I can see that it hits him harder than anger would have. Disappointment suggests a failure to meet expectations, a falling short of the standards he's always claimed to uphold. "The business is complicated," he says, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "The tax implications alone." "Don't," I say, holding up a hand. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about taxes or business efficiency. This is about power, about control, about making sure the Mitchell name stays with the Mitchell men. That's not fair, Sarah, isn't it?" I lean forward, my eyes fixed on his. "I've run this place for 15 years, Dad. I've grown the business, improved the facilities, built relationships with guests that keep them coming back year after year. I've sacrificed my own dreams, my own ambitions, to serve this family's legacy. And now you're telling me that it was all temporary, that I was just keeping the seat warm until the real heir was ready to take over." "You'll still have a role," he says, but there's no conviction in his voice. "At Bradley's discretion," I point out. "As his employee." "Dad, I'm 43 years old. I'm not a child who needs to be managed or supervised. I'm a grown woman who has earned the right to be treated as an equal partner in this business. He's quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally speaks, his voice is soft, almost regretful. It's not that simple, Sarah. There are family considerations, legal complexities. There are always complications when you're trying to justify the unjustifiable. I interrupt. Dad, I want you to think about what you're doing. Really think about it. You're taking a business that I've helped build and handing it over to someone who has never shown the same level of commitment, the same passion, the same dedication that I have. Bradley is family, he says, and there's something in his voice that makes my stomach clench. And what am I? I ask quietly. What is Emma? The question hangs in the air between us, and I can see him struggling with the answer. Because the truth is too ugly to say out loud, too revealing of the assumptions that have guided his thinking for decades. We're family, but we're female family. And in the Mitchell world, that has always been a secondary consideration. You're both very important to me, he says finally, but the words feel hollow. Important enough to include in decisions about our future, I ask. Important enough to consider our rights and interests when you're restructuring the business? He doesn't answer, and his silence is more damning than any words could be. I stand up, suddenly feeling exhausted by the weight of decades of unspoken assumptions and casual discrimination. I'm going to fight this, Dad, I say quietly. I'm going to fight for Emma's inheritance, for my own rights, for the recognition that we deserve. I hope you'll reconsider before it comes to that, but if you won't, then I'm prepared to take this as far as necessary. Sarah, I'm not asking for charity, I interrupt. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the same consideration you'd give to any other family member who had devoted their life to this business. I'm asking for fairness. I leave him sitting by the fire, his whiskey untouched, his face etched with the kind of regret that comes from recognizing a mistake too late to easily fix it. The conversation has accomplished what I hoped it would. It's made my position clear, established my intention to fight, and forced him to confront the reality of what he's doing. But as I climb the stairs to my room, I'm not naive enough to believe that one conversation will change decades of ingrained thinking. The battle for Pine Ridge Lodge is just beginning, and I suspect it will get much uglier before it's resolved. Emma is already asleep when I enter our room, her small form curled under the quilt my grandmother made decades ago. The same quilt that covered me when I was her age, dreaming of the day when I would run this place, when I would carry on the Mitchell legacy with the same pride and dedication that had defined my family for generations. I sit by the window looking out at the familiar landscape and feel the weight of history pressing down on me. This place holds so many memories, so many moments of joy and discovery and growth. It's where I learned to fish, where I fell in love with the wilderness, where I discovered my passion for hospitality and business. But it's also where I learned about limitations, about the subtle ways that women are marginalized and excluded, about the difference between being valued and being empowered. It's where I learned that love isn't always enough, that family bonds can be conditional, that even the most fundamental assumptions about fairness and justice can be challenged by those who have the power to do so. The irony isn't lost on me. I've spent my adult life fighting for the rights of others, advocating for fair treatment and equal opportunity in every aspect of my professional life. But I've been blind to the ways that my own family has been systematically excluding me from the very decisions that will determine my future. No more. The time for graceful acceptance is over. The time for fighting has begun. I pull out my phone and begin researching estate planning attorneys, business succession specialists, legal professionals who understand the complexities of family enterprises. If the Mitchell family wants to wage this battle in boardrooms and law offices, Then I'll meet them there, armed with the same legal expertise they're using against me. But I'm also thinking about other weapons in this fight, other sources of power and influence that they might not expect. The relationships I've built with guests over the years, the reputation I've earned in the hospitality industry, the knowledge I have of every aspect of the lodge's operations. Most importantly, I'm thinking about Emma, about the future I want to create for her. Not just the inheritance she deserves, but the world she'll inherit. A world where women don't have to fight for recognition of their contributions, where family means inclusion rather than exclusion, where merit matters more than gender. The battle for Pine Ridge Lodge is about more than property or money. It's about justice, about fairness, about the kind of legacy we want to leave for the next generation. And I'm prepared to fight for it with everything I have. As I finally drift off to sleep, my last thought is of Emma, sleeping peacefully beside me, unaware of the storm that's gathering around her. She trusts me to protect her, to ensure that she has the same opportunities and advantages that every other Mitchell child has taken for granted. I won't let her down. I can't let her down. The future of Pine Ridge Lodge depends on it. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. The next morning brings an unexpected visitor to Pine Ridge Lodge, one whose presence immediately shifts the carefully balanced dynamics of our family gathering. I'm in the kitchen, helping Margaret prepare breakfast, while Emma feeds scraps to the chipmunks outside. When I hear the unmistakable sound of expensive tires on our gravel driveway, through the window, I watch as a sleek black sedan pulls up to the main entrance, its urban sophistication jarring against the rustic beauty of our mountain setting. The driver who emerges is a woman in her 50s, immaculately dressed in a way that speaks of city boardrooms and legal offices. She moves with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. "Who is that?" Margaret asks, her voice carrying a note of concern. Before I can answer, Bradley appears from the direction of the guest parking area, his face breaking into a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He greets the woman with a handshake that seems more formal than friendly, and they engage in a brief conversation that I can't hear from our position in the kitchen. "That," I say, recognizing the woman from the legal documents I saw yesterday, "is Patricia Harrison. She's a corporate attorney from Denver." Margaret's expression shifts from curiosity to alarm. "What is she doing here?" "I suspect she's here to discuss the business restructuring," I reply, my voice carefully neutral. The same restructuring that everyone seems to know about except me. The silence that follows is heavy with implications. Margaret's face flushes, and I can see her weighing her words carefully, trying to find a way to respond that doesn't reveal too much, while still maintaining the facade of family unity. "Sarah," she begins, her voice carrying a note of pleading, "you have to understand that these decisions aren't personal. They're about protecting the business, ensuring that Pine Ridge Lodge remains profitable and sustainable for future generations." "Future generations," I repeat, the phrase tasting bitter in my mouth. "And who exactly gets to determine which generations those are?" Before Margaret can answer, Bradley and Patricia Harrison enter the kitchen, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere in the room. Patricia extends her hand toward me with the practiced smile of a professional who has learned to navigate delicate family situations. "Miss Mitchell," she says, her voice carrying the polished cadence of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. "I'm Patricia Harrison. I've heard so much about your work with the lodge." "I'm sure you have," I reply, accepting her handshake with a grip that matches her firmness. "I'm curious about what brings you to Pine Ridge Lodge, Miss Harrison." "Please call me Patricia," she says, her smile never wavering. "I'm here at the family's request to discuss some business matters. Nothing too complicated, just some organizational restructuring that will help streamline operations." The euphemisms roll off her tongue with practiced ease, but I can see the calculation behind her professional demeanor. She's assessing me, trying to determine how much I know and how much resistance I'm likely to offer. It's a dance I've seen before, the careful choreography of legal maneuvering disguised as friendly consultation. I see, I say, my voice carrying a sweetness that doesn't match the steel in my eyes. And this organizational restructuring, does it involve transferring ownership of the lodge to a family trust? Sarah, Margaret says, her voice carrying a note of pleading. You have to understand that none of this is personal. We all care about you and Emma. We all want what's best for the family. Do you? I ask, my voice quiet but intense. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you all want what's best for the Mitchell men, and everyone else can adjust accordingly. Margaret's face flushes, and I can see her struggling with the truth of my words. That's not fair, Sarah. You know how much you mean to this family. I know how much my work means to this family, I correct. I know how much my dedication and sacrifice have contributed to the lodge's success. But that's not the same thing as being valued as a family member with legitimate rights and interests. You're overreacting, Margaret says, but there's no conviction in her voice. Am I ask. Margaret, I've been running this place for 15 years. I've grown the business, improved the facilities, built relationships with guests that keep them coming back year after year. I've sacrificed my own dreams and ambitions to serve this family's legacy, and now I'm being told that my role is conditional, that my future depends on the generosity of someone who has never shown the same level of commitment. Margaret is quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the mountains that have defined our family's identity for 3 generations. When she finally speaks, her voice is soft, almost regretful. It's not that simple, Sarah. There are considerations you don't understand, complications that go beyond day-to-day operations. Then explain them to me, I challenge. Stop treating me like a child who can't understand complex business decisions. I've been making those decisions for 15 years. It's about legacy, Margaret says finally. About ensuring that the Mitchell name continues, that the family business stays in the family. And what am I ask. What is Emma? Are we not family? The question hangs in the air between us, and I can see Margaret struggling with the implications of her words, because the truth is too ugly to say out loud, too revealing of the assumptions that have guided the family's thinking for decades. You're both very important, she says finally, but the words feel hollow. Important enough to include in decisions about our future, I press. Important enough to consider our rights and interests when you're restructuring the business? Margaret doesn't answer, and her silence is more damning than any words could be. I stand up, suddenly feeling exhausted by the weight of decades of unspoken assumptions and casual discrimination. I'm going to fight this, Margaret, I say quietly. I'm going to fight for Emma's inheritance, for my own rights, for the recognition that we deserve. I hope you'll reconsider before it comes to that, but if you won't, then I'm prepared to take this as far as necessary. I leave her sitting at the kitchen table, her coffee growing cold, her face etched with the kind of regret that comes from recognizing a mistake too late to easily fix it. The conversation has accomplished what I hoped it would. It's made my position clear, established my intention to fight, and forced her to confront the reality of what the family is doing. But as I step outside into the crisp mountain air, I'm not naive enough to believe that one conversation will change decades of ingrained thinking. The battle for Pine Ridge Lodge is escalating, and I suspect it will get much uglier before it's resolved. I find Emma and my father down by the lake, exactly where I expected them to be. Emma is trying to skip stones while my father offers gentle guidance, their voices carrying across the water with the kind of easy affection that has always defined their relationship. "Look, Mom," Emma calls out when she sees me approaching. "Grandpa taught me how to find the best stones." I watch her select a flat, smooth stone from the collection at her feet, her small face serious with concentration. She draws her arm back and releases the stone with a flick of her wrist, and we all watch as it skips across the surface of the lake, leaving small ripples in its wake. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I say, genuinely proud of her accomplishment. "You're a natural." "Grandpa says I have good form," Emma replies, beaming with pride. "He says it's all about the wrist action." "Your grandfather is right," I tell her, though my eyes are on my father, trying to read his expression. "He's taught a lot of people how to skip stones on this lake." My father meets my gaze, and I can see the complexity of emotions in his eyes. Love, regret, frustration, and something that might be shame. He knows what's happening, understands the implications of the decisions that are being made without my input. "Emma," he says, his voice carrying a note of gentle authority, "why don't you see if you can find some more good stones down the beach? The really flat ones are usually closer to the water." Emma nods and skips off, her attention already focused on her new mission. She's far enough away that she can't hear our conversation, but close enough that we can keep an eye on her. "She's a good kid," my father says, his voice carrying a note of pride. "Reminds me of you at that age. Always curious, always eager to learn." "She is a good kid," I agree. "She's also a Mitchell kid. She deserves the same opportunities and advantages that every other Mitchell child has had." My father sighs, a sound that seems to carry the weight of decades. "Sarah, I know you're upset about the restructuring plans." "I'm not upset," I interrupt, my voice calm but firm. "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." He flinches at the word disappointed, and I can see that it hits him harder than anger would have. Disappointment suggests a failure to meet expectations, a falling short of the standards he's always claimed to uphold. "The legal implications are complex," he says, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has been having this conversation in his head for months. "The tax consequences alone could destroy the business if we don't plan properly." "I'm not arguing against proper planning," I reply. "I'm arguing against planning that excludes the people who have the most invested in the outcome." "You'll still have a role." "At Bradley's discretion," I interrupt. "Dad, I'm 43 years old. I've been running this place for 15 years. I've grown the business, improved the facilities, built relationships with guests that keep them coming back year after year. I've earned the right to be treated as an equal partner in this business." "It's not that simple," he says, but there's no conviction in his voice. "It's exactly that simple," I counter. "You're choosing to prioritize Bradley's claim to the business over mine, despite the fact that I've demonstrated more commitment, more competence, and more passion for this place than he has." "Bradley is—" Emma's voice carries across the water, calling for us to come see the collection of stones she's assembled. The sound breaks the tension of our conversation, reminding us both of what's really at stake in this battle. "She loves this place," my father says, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "She loves it the same way you did at her age." "Yes," I agree. "She does. And I'm going to make sure that love is honored, that she has the same opportunities to be part of this family's legacy that you've always given to the Mitchell men." I leave him standing by the lake, his face etched with the kind of regret that comes from recognizing a mistake too late to easily fix it. The conversation has accomplished what I hoped it would. It's made my position clear, established my intention to fight, and forced him to confront the reality of what his decision will mean for Emma's future. But as I walk back toward the lodge, I'm not naive enough to believe that one conversation will change decades of ingrained thinking. The battle for Pine Ridge Lodge is escalating, and I suspect it will get much uglier before it's resolved. The afternoon brings with it a flurry of activity, as more family members arrive for the weekend gathering. Cousins and aunts and uncles stream through the lodge, filling the space with the familiar chaos of a Mitchell family reunion. But underneath the surface pleasantries, I can feel the tension, the awareness that something fundamental has shifted in the family dynamic. I watch it all with new eyes, cataloguing each interaction, each subtle signal of allegiance or opposition. The way certain conversations stop when I enter a room, the way eyes avoid mine when I ask direct questions, the way family members seem to be choosing sides in a battle that hasn't been formally declared. It's a chess game, I realize, with each family member positioned as a piece on the board. The question is whether I'm a player in this game or just another piece to be moved around at someone else's discretion. That evening, as the family gathers for dinner, I find myself studying their faces with the detached interest of an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. These people who have been my family for 15 years, who have shared holidays and celebrations and moments of joy, suddenly seem like strangers wearing familiar masks. The conversation flows around me, touching on safe topics like the weather, the lodge's recent improvements, and plans for the weekend. But underneath the surface pleasantries, I can feel the undercurrents of tension, the awareness that everyone is waiting for something to happen. "Sarah," Patricia Harrison says during a lull in the conversation, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone trying to navigate a minefield. "I was wondering if you'd had a chance to review the preliminary documents I left with Bradley." All eyes turn to me, and I can feel the weight of their collective attention. This is another test, I realize. Another chance for me to show that I'm still willing to play by the old rules, to accept my diminished role without causing a scene. "I've reviewed them," I say, my voice carrying a calm that surprises even me. "I've also shared them with my legal counsel." The silence that follows is deafening. Patricia's fork pauses halfway to her mouth, and I can see the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't expecting me to have legal representation so quickly, wasn't prepared for the possibility that I might actually fight back.